Fraternal orders have always been a curious reflection of the societies that spawned them. From the solemn rites of Freemasonry to the playful antics of organizations like the Shriners or the Oddfellows, these groups served as social anchors and imaginative escape valves in 19th and early 20th century America. Among the most obscure and fascinating of these was the ancient mystic order of the Bagmen of Baghdad, AMOBB, a Masonic side order that blended elaborate parody, coded ritual, Orientalist spectacle, and fraternal camaraderie into a singular experience. Almost entirely forgotten today, the Bagmen represented both the lighthearted and deeply symbolic tendencies within American fraternal culture. They were at once jesters and initiates, mocking the very seriousness of their parent orders while secretly preserving many of their structural elements. The name itself, Ancient Mystic Order of the Bagmen of Baghdad, reveals much about the spirit of the organization. Ancient and mystic nod to the pseudo-historical and esoteric pretensions common in Masonic circles, while Bagmen and Baghdad evoke a fantastical Middle Eastern setting that resonated with Western imaginations of the Orient in the late 19th century. Like the ancient Arabic order of the nobles of the mystic shrine, the Shriners, with whom they shared many stylistic traits, the Bagmen borrowed heavily from romanticized imagery of the Islamic Golden Age, weaving references to bazaars, caliphs, and desert mysticism into their ceremonies. But where the Shriners presented themselves as nobles of the mystic shrine, the Bagmen approached the theme with a wink and a smirk. They were bagmen, travelers, traders, and tricksters of the mythical Baghdad marketplace, and their rituals often lampooned the pompous solemnity of mainstream masonry. To understand how the ancient mystic order of the Bagmen of Baghdad came to be, it's essential to situate them within the broader fraternal explosion that swept across America in the 1800s and early 1900s. By the late 19th century, the United States was a nation obsessed with fraternalism. Freemasonry, brought from Europe in the colonial period, had by then spawned countless offshoots, side orders, and this phenomenon was not confined to Masonry alone. Organizations like the Knights of Pythias, Oddfellows, Woodmen of the World, and Improved Order of Red Men all flourished, attracting millions of men seeking companionship, ritual, and social mobility in a rapidly industrializing society. Many men belonged to multiple orders simultaneously, often advancing from solemn initiations in a lodge to jovial evenings with a play order that poked fun at the very rituals they had just performed. The Bagmen of Baghdad emerged squarely within this milieu. While exact records of their founding are scarce, as is often the case with ephemeral side orders, historians believe the AMOBB likely formed in the late 19th or early 20th century, possibly in the American Midwest or East Coast, where Masonic lodges and shrine temples were most active. Like many side orders, the Bagmen were not an independent organization, but a side degree or invitational club within the Masonic ecosystem. To become a Bagman, one had to be a Master Mason, and often a Shriner, already. Membership in the ancient mystic order of the Bagmen of Baghdad was considered a mark of social prestige and humor among the fraternity's more playful members. Unlike mainstream lodges, which often had strict hierarchies and public charters, the Bagmen operated more informally. Local bags, their equivalent of lodges, were usually hosted in rented halls or borrowed Masonic temples, and their rosters remained small and selective. The Bagmen were never a mass movement like the Shriners, but rather a niche order for those who appreciated both the pageantry and parody of fraternal life. Its members were typically well-versed in Masonic ritual, as many of the Bagmen's own ceremonies were elaborate parodies of those rituals. The order also emphasized camaraderie, storytelling, and humor over philanthropy or public pageants, a sharp contrast to groups like the Shriners, who became famous for parades and hospitals. Perhaps the most distinctive feature of the Bagmen was their approach to ritual. Where mainstream Masonry cloaked itself in biblical allegory and solemn moral lessons, and where the Shriners evoked the grandeur of Islamic courts and temples, the Bagmen leaned into absurdist humor and theatrical farce. Their initiations were elaborately coded and theatrically staged, often lampooning both Masonic seriousness and Orientalist spectacle. A typical initiation might begin with the candidate being blindfolded and sold in a mock Baghdad bazaar, haggled over by robed merchants speaking in a deliberately mangled Eastern jargon. The Caliph of the Sacred Sack, the presiding officer, would then subject the initiate to a series of comical tests designed to measure their worthiness to join the order. These tests, while humorous, were often allegorical in nature, riffing on Masonic virtues like charity, fidelity, and humility, but reframed in the language of the marketplace and the desert caravan. For example, one initiation segment reportedly involved the candidate attempting to carry a ridiculously heavy bag of wisdom across the room, only to discover that the bag contained nothing but sand, a playful lesson about the burdens we choose to carry. Another test might involve answering absurd riddles from the Grand Keeper of the Bazaar, whose nonsensical questions disguised deeper moral messages about patience, honesty, and humility. Despite the comedy, the Bagmen's rituals were not mere buffoonery. They were carefully choreographed and richly symbolic, requiring memorized scripts, specific regalia, and elaborate stage settings. Initiates often emerged from the ceremonies laughing, but also reflecting on the subtle moral lessons embedded in the farce. Like most fraternal orders, the Bagmen of Baghdad reveled in distinctive regalia and symbols, which were both theatrical and meaningful. Members typically wore robes or tunics inspired, however loosely, by imagined Middle Eastern attire, complete with turbans, sashes, and embroidered scrip bearing the order's emblem. Central among these emblems was the bag, often depicted as a stylized sack or pouch overflowing with coins, scrolls, or stars. This symbol represented not only the merchant's livelihood, but also the idea of accumulated wisdom and virtue, the treasures a bagman was meant to carry through life. Another recurring symbol was the bazaar gate, a metaphor for the threshold between the mundane and the mystic, and a clear parallel to the tiled doors of a Masonic lodge. The titles within the order continued the theme. The presiding officer was often called the Caliph of the Sacred Sack, while other officers bore titles like Vizier of the Caravan, Keeper of the Market Scales, and Guardian of the Golden Bag. These tongue-in-cheek titles parodied the grandiose names of Masonic offices while enhancing the immersive fantasy of the order's rituals. The choice of Baghdad and Bagmen as the order's thematic core was not accidental. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, Western culture was fascinated by the Orient, a broad, romanticized concept that encompassed the Middle East, North Africa, and parts of Asia. Popular literature like 1001 Nights, often known as Arabian Nights, captured the Western imagination with tales of caliphs, thieves, and magical cities. Baghdad, as the legendary seat of the Abbasid Caliphate and the setting for many Arabian Nights tales, was a potent symbol of mystery, wisdom, and exoticism. Fraternal orders like the Shriners had already capitalized on this Orientalist fascination, creating elaborate rituals and regalia that evoked the grandeur of Islamic courts. The Bagmen followed suit, but approached the theme with a sense of parody and satire. Their Baghdad was not the historical city of Harun al-Rashid, but a fantastical, exaggerated bazaar, a place of merchants, storytellers, and tricksters, where wisdom was traded like spices and virtue was weighed on the scales of the marketplace. This Orientalist fantasy, while often based on caricature and stereotype, served several functions. It provided a dramatic backdrop for the order's rituals, allowing members to step into a world far removed from their everyday lives. At the same time, the Bagmen's parody of the Oriental theme could also be read as a subtle commentary on the absurdities of such exoticism. By portraying themselves not as noble princes, but as bumbling bagmen, the order may have been gently mocking the Western tendency to romanticize and appropriate Eastern cultures, even as they participated in that very process. The ancient mystic order of the Bagmen of Baghdad was never primarily a philanthropic organization, nor did it seek the public visibility of larger orders like the Shriners. Instead, its primary purpose was fellowship, entertainment, and shared identity among its members. Meetings, often called bazaars, were lively affairs featuring storytelling, humorous speeches, and comedic performances alongside the more structured rituals. The Bagmen placed a strong emphasis on storytelling, a nod to the Arabian Nights tradition, and meetings often included members spinning elaborate, fantastical tales of their adventures in the markets of Baghdad. These stories, while fictional, often served as allegories for moral or fraternal lessons, much as Masonic lectures do. Social events extended beyond the lodge room. The Bagmen frequently hosted banquets, mock bazaars, and costume balls, inviting members of other fraternal orders and even the public. These events allowed the order to showcase its playful character and recruit new members, while also strengthening bonds within the broader fraternal community. Although it was never officially sanctioned by mainstream Masonic bodies, the ancient mystic order of the Bagmen of Baghdad maintained a close and symbiotic relationship with them. Most bagmen were master masons and often also Shriners, and meetings were frequently held in Masonic temples. The bagmen did not attempt to replace or rival the solemn rituals of Masonry, but rather to complement them with humor and fellowship. This relationship mirrored that of other side degrees and fun orders, like the Royal Order of Jesters, a Shriner-affiliated group known for bawdy, humor, or the Order of Quetzalcoatl, a Masonic side order with Mesoamerican themes. These organizations allowed members to relax and bond socially in ways that might be inappropriate in the more formal lodge setting. Like many small fraternal groups, the ancient mystic order of the Bagmen of Baghdad began to fade in the mid-20th century. Several factors contributed to its decline. The post-World War II era saw a gradual waning of fraternal culture in America. Changing social dynamics, increased mobility, the rise of new forms of entertainment, and the decline of all male social spaces all contributed to shrinking memberships across the board. Smaller side orders like the Bagmen were particularly vulnerable. Without large memberships or independent infrastructure, they relied on the vitality of their parent organizations and the enthusiasm of local lodges. As attendance dwindled and older members passed away, many bags simply stopped meeting. By the late 20th century, the AMOBB had largely disappeared from the fraternal landscape, remembered only in scattered references in Masonic literature and the dusty minute books of forgotten lodges. Though little known today, the ancient mystic order of the Bagmen of Baghdad offers a fascinating window into the world of American fraternalism. It illustrates how humor and parody could coexist with solemn ritual, and how even the most light-hearted orders still engaged with profound moral and symbolic themes. The Bagmen's rituals, while comedic, were not frivolous. They offered members a space to explore Masonic virtues in new and unexpected ways, to laugh at themselves and their traditions, and to forge deeper bonds through shared absurdity. In this sense, the Bagmen exemplify the carnivalesque dimension of fraternal life, a safe, structured inversion of the normal order that allowed members to return to their solemn duties with renewed perspective. Moreover, the Bagmen highlight the role of Orientalist fantasy in Western fraternal culture. Like the Shriners, the Bagmen used an imagined Middle Eastern setting to create a sense of mystery and antiquity, a practice that reveals much about Western cultural attitudes of the time. While such portrayals are rightly critiqued today for their stereotypes and cultural appropriation, they also speak to a deep-seated human impulse, the desire to connect with imagined worlds beyond one's own, to seek meaning and identity in mythic pasts. Finally, the Bagmen remind us that even the most obscure and humorous corners of history can reveal serious truths about the societies that produced them. In their parodies and pageants, the Bagmen of Baghdad were not merely playing dress-up. They were participating in a broader cultural project, one that sought to build community, transmit values, and find joy and wisdom in shared stories and symbols. Today, the ancient mystic order of the Bagmen of Baghdad exists mostly as a footnote in fraternal history, a name occasionally mentioned in Masonic encyclopedias or whispered among historians of the lodge. Few records survive, and fewer still remember their ceremonies. Yet their spirit lingers, not only in the dusty regalia and fading photographs left behind, but in the enduring human impulse they embodied. The urge to gather together, to weave stories, to laugh at ourselves, and to seek deeper truths beneath the veil of comedy. The Bagmen were more than a joke, though they were certainly that. They were a living testament to the flexibility and creativity of fraternal culture, proof that even the most solemn institutions could find room for play. Their bazaar may have closed long ago, but the echoes of their laughter still drift through the halls of fraternal memory, a reminder that wisdom can indeed be carried in a bag, and that sometimes the heaviest bags are filled not with gold, but with joy.